back. WNST personally for me, and I do appreciate all the reaches on behalf of my mom and my family, for my wife and my son and all of us. We say a big thank you to you. This guy came and paid respects to my mom. I think he had a mouthful of beer. It's always a classy funeral when you say, hey, the keg's in the corner. Help yourself, right, Luke Jones?
Absolutely. I mean, when you remember loved ones, you remember what they loved most. And I didn't know your mom particularly well, but I know she liked to have a brew.
The occasional.
Yeah. So I thought that was a really cool touch. I mean, I can remember my father's funeral 13 years ago. He had always said he didn't want to be buried in a suit. He wasn't a suit guy. He had a Ray Lewis jersey for his viewing, and we all wore Raven stuff. So that was kind of our ode to him, so I really appreciated what you did there.
Well, we're working on that. We're still working on the aftermath of all of it, and certainly my mom's first love and passion was always the Orioles, and on the night that we had her viewing on Friday night, I came home and I heard the thunder and lightning and fireworks outside, and I looked up, and Manny Machado hit a walk-off grand slam on the night of my mom's viewing, and some thought it quite serendipitous, but then the rest of the weekend happened in regard to the Orioles. Dude, this is getting slippery. It's starting to fall down the mountain. Not that any of us would or could be shocked by this, but I'm kind of shocked it's happening at home here.
Yeah, and especially after what happened Friday night. I mean, that, for my money, that was the game of the year as far as just entertainment value, drama. Manny Machado, obviously, with a 3-home run performance. It wasn't quite the Chris Hoyle's ultimate grand slam from yesteryear, but you hit a grand slam when you're down by 2 runs. I mean, that's as exciting as it gets. And as much as you look at moments like that and you hope it's a turning point, you hope it's the start of something special. I mean, everyone thinks back to Doug DeCence's home run in '79, and the birth of Orioles magic.
I was at that game, by the way. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, and you always hope that that's going to be the start of something special. And Buck Showalter says it, and it's not. It's a cliche. You'll hear any great manager, any knowledgeable baseball person say, momentum is as good as the next game's starting pitcher, and Kevin Gausman was brutal on Saturday night. And, they didn't score any runs. They scored 1 run on a wild pitch in the first inning and nothing the rest of that way. And it just ended up being a lost weekend. I mean, you just said it, with the way that this team has played at home all year, despite the fact that they have been under 500 for the better part of a couple months now, they've been really good at home, and you expect them to come home and play good baseball. They steal one on Friday night, and you're thinking, okay, at least take 2 out of 3. I mean, you'd love to sweep because the Angels are one of those teams that are currently in that second wild card position right there with the Twins, and instead you lose 2 in a row. You fall to 4 games below 500 for the first time in quite a while, and as you said, I mean, it's not over. But, I mean, there's so many teams ahead of them. They're now 4 games back of that second wild card spot. It's starting to get late early, around, to borrow a phrase. And you keep waiting for it. And yes, they've played better since the All-Star break. They had a nice little run there. But now you look at it, they haven't won consecutive games since August 5th and 6th, August 5th through 7th, when they won 3 straight. And, you look at that, that's a 2-week period where they've kind of just win 1, lose 1, win 1, lose 2. It's just 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And I think the best way to illustrate that is not just this series loss, but their last 4 series now, all 3 on the road trip, and now this series against the Angels, they won the opener of all 4 of those series. And when you do that, you feel, hey, you're in great position to at least take 2 out of 3.
Well, especially when you're on the road, too.
Right.
Yeah.
And they haven't won any of those series. 3 series losses, and then they had the disappointing split in Oakland. I mean, that's just, that's the epitome of 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And when you're where the Orioles are right now, you're waiting to see another 22-10 kind of run like they had at the beginning of the season. And just doesn't feel like it's in the cards. And the starting pitching that had been better, it's really kind of reverted to what we were seeing for the better part of 2.5 months. 4 straight games where they didn't get through 5 innings, and Chris Tillman got through 5 innings, but was lifted shortly thereafter and was not very good on Sunday either. But it's kind of been a collective thing. Sunday they tie the game up, and then the bullpen gives up a run. It was the bats on Saturday that, even though Gaussman wasn't very good, they're just, as much as we've talked about that expression of passing the baton and it being a different guy every night, really it's been more passing the baton of finding ways to lose. And clearly the starting pitching has been at the top of the list by a pretty wide margin. But we've talked about the offense. We've talked about the bullpen, a large part of it being because of injuries, but not being as dominant, as stellar as it's been in past years.
I don't know that anything's as stellar as it's been in past years, bro.
Yeah.
Literally.
Sure.
And part of that, and I want to get to the heart of the Machado thing, but analyze that play where Machado's screaming at Scope, and Scope doesn't get to third base. Then Machado lets the ball go between his legs, kicks the ball around. These are just not the mistakes that good teams make, and Machado does stand in the middle of this as someone that they absolutely count on, which they didn't really count on him 3 or 4 years ago when they were the better team that they were. He was a nice piece. He was an emerging piece. Now he's a piece with his hand out for $300 million. And, dude, I'm not feeling it. I'm not sensing it. I don't sense that he's really a grown-up, and I see that, and I say that from Sunday afternoon because, yelling at your teammate as you cross the field, dude, that's a clown act, for me. Anyway.
Well, look, there are plenty of times where he's been lackadaisical on the base paths. That him breaking home there is the correct play.
Correct.
Now you can because the whole idea is if you stay at third, they're going to turn a double play then. Andrelton Simmons is, for my money, one of the most underrated players in baseball because of his incredible defense, and he's hitting this year. But he's got to break home there now. You could make the argument and say, well, maybe you just force him to make a throw and Scope should be able to advance then. He didn't stay in a rundown as long as he maybe would have liked. Scope didn't break. It was just discombobulated.
It was bad baseball, and we've seen a lot of that. You and I have gotten together twice a week and had to say, what are they, they're not thinking out. They're not playing good fundamental baseball.
Yeah, like I said, it's not, the play wasn't wrong that he started running home, but there was just, and I'll give both of them some blame there, I suppose. But, it's one of those plays where, it's very clear what you want to do there. You want to draw a throw, stay in a rundown long enough that a guy gets back to third base, and no harm, no foul then. You're first and third, one out then.
That's good baseball.
Yeah, that's what you want to do there. So, I saw some people kind of saying, well, he shouldn't have gone home there. Yeah, you should, because otherwise they're going to turn the double play. But, it just, this whole season has felt off. Beyond those first 5.5 weeks when they were winning so many close games and the bullpen was doing a good job, and they weren't crushing the ball, but they were very opportunistic. They were really good with runners in scoring position. And the starting pitching wasn't great then, but it was consistently good enough to give them a chance, let's say. And, it's fallen apart then. They clearly had the stretch where the starting pitching was so bad that it wasn't competitive. I knew that it wasn't going to be that bad the rest of the year, but they're just not good enough. They're not a terrible team. There's some pretty terrible teams in baseball. The Phillies, you go down the list. They're not that awful, but they just haven't been able to string together.
It's late August, and I don't think we can really talk about them being a threat to win a championship.
No, and even from a wild card standpoint, and we've talked about this at length. We've said the best argument for the Orioles has been that all these other teams aren't that good. But now you look and you see what Minnesota's done after they sold. Amazingly, you see what the Angels have done. Really, they kind of got on their roll, starting with the Orioles on the West Coast, being out there, and they take 2 of 3, and they haven't separated per se, but both those teams now find themselves 4 games over 500. And you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago when the Orioles were starting to play better. They had gotten back to 500, and we said, okay, you need to get over 500. You need to get over that hump. Get yourselves 2, 3, 4 games above 500. One, you'll probably either be in the wild card spot or within a half game or a game. And 2, it's just, there's a different perception there. There's a different feel when you've won more games than you lost. and it's been that same thing. Every time they've gotten close, they did get back to 500 that one time, but every time since then, they get to one game under where they got a chance to stack another win and get back there, and they haven't been able to do it. And the problem is now, over the last week, they've fallen back now. They're 4 games below 500. So,
well, Tampa and Toronto falling down the mountain too. I mean,
oh yeah, I mean the American League East clearly Boston separated themselves here over the last few weeks. The Yankees have kind of comfortably been in that first wild card spot, but Tampa was knocking on the door there for a while. The Orioles were kind of sort of hanging around, and you've seen both of those teams really fall off. I mean, Tampa's really fallen off, considering they were a few games above 500 at one point. So it just doesn't look like it's in the cards. I mean, is it mathematically possible? Yeah, because you're looking at those second wild card teams that they're not running away with it per se, but they are starting to play a little bit better, and you're just waiting for that run. And I said it when they went on the West Coast that I thought the Orioles were another 10-day, another 8-2 kind of a stretch away from seriously being back in this thing. And they've lost 8 of their last 12.
And that's only going to happen at home. 8-2 only happens for them at home. That doesn't happen
right. I mean, is it conceivable that they could have a decent road trip at some point? Remember, last year they had a good road trip late in the season when they kind of needed to. But it was kind of a similar story last year. But this season just continues to remind me of 2015 in so many different ways. And it was a similar story there with the wild card at a very similar point in the season where that second spot was kind of just sitting there. And you said, well, the Orioles still have a chance. And then they lost 12 out of 13. Now, you hope they don't have a stretch like that, but certainly not being able to build off of that dramatic win on Friday night. Just very, very disappointing to come home and drop another series.
He is Luke Jones covering all things Orioles, and now, again, dregs, right? We talked about the bad teams in baseball. We talked about the A's last weekend and the Friday night meltdown into the middle of the night, but this is where they have to begin to pick up some ground, or we really will be kicking the ball off September 10th, and the Orioles will be an afterthought. I mean, I hate to go Elvis Presley here on a weekend of Engelbert Humperdinck, but it kind of is now or never, though, right?
It's really getting close to that point, sure. The one saving grace for them is they have what? They have, the 3 games against Oakland. They go to Boston this coming weekend for 3, and then they're back home for another, 10-game homestand. So if you look at it from that standpoint, yeah, it does kind of feel like Showalter's last stand, to put it in a war terms, as far as if they're going to make something of this season, you feel like it's going to have to come in these next 16 games or so. If not, if they go 8-8 over that time, I think you kind of forget it then.
Well, it feels like we're sort of close to the Ravens playing a real game because we're getting there, and that would be the determining factor for me. Or, on September 10th when the Ravens are in Cincinnati, are the Orioles alive or dead? Right now it feels like DOA right now. And 2 weeks ago we could have said, well, maybe there'll be 3 games over 500 by then or 4 games over. I don't see that happening. I don't see them playing that well over the next 2 weeks, but this would be the time. Look, going to Boston this weekend, they're throwing Gausman, Tillman, and Jimenez. I mean, how do you expect to win in Boston like that?
Well, about the only thing you'd say is, well, they have played Boston pretty well. Earlier in the season, they did play them pretty well, even with some of the drama that was certainly involved. But when you look at how the Red Sox have been playing over the last month compared to what the Orioles have played over the better part of the last 2 or 3 months, it's hard to have a whole lot of optimism. But, again, because they do have so many games at home here, I'm not ready to put the final nail in the coffin just yet. But it's getting to that point where, you're just running out of games. This team is 60-64. They've played 124 games. They have 38 games left. There's not a whole lot of season left when you think about it in those terms. And they're 4 under 500. So, and look, I think we know it appears at this point that last year with the Orioles and the Blue Jays both winning 89 games, I'm guessing it's not going to take 89 games to be the second wild card, but you'd have to think you have to at least get to 8, 9, 10 games over 500, probably somewhere in that neighborhood. And when you have to make up that much ground in a 38-game period, you're talking about having to play some excellent baseball over the final 5.5 weeks here or so, and I just don't see enough signs from this team to think that they're going to be able to do that. I think they can play well at home. I think they can win a couple series here and maybe get themselves back to 500, but you feel like how much effort has to be exerted just to do that. It just doesn't feel good in that regard. And Chris Tillman starting on Sunday, I mean, I understand they're trying to get some extra rest for Dylan Bundy and trying to get an extra day for some of these other guys, but I know the results weren't disastrous for Tillman like we've seen in some other starts, but anyone who watched that, you could probably count, I'd be exaggerating a little bit, but there were very few pitches over the course of that outing where he was even within 2 or 3 inches of the target. I mean, even when he was throwing strikes, Caleb Joseph setting up on the outside corner, and it'd come on the inside corner. He'd be setting up low and away, pitch would come up and in. And that's what we saw from Tillman, what we've seen from him all year. So I understand he had a couple decent outings in the bullpen, but I don't get putting him back in the rotation. If it's a spot start and they're truly just giving these guys an extra day and he's going to go back into kind of a swing role in the bullpen, fine, but there are too many starters right now that you just don't have confidence in. And even on Saturday night, Kevin Gausman, who has been so good with Caleb Joseph behind the plate, for whatever reason, and Joseph was the original catcher on Saturday night, Buck puts Castillo back in. He was coming off of an illness. I don't know why he did that. And it's not an excuse for Gausman. He should be able to pitch better than he did on Saturday night if you or I were catching behind the plate and handling him. But that's been such a combination that's been so good for them of late, that Joseph-Gausman connection, and to have him with Wellington Castillo, it just felt like a bad mojo thing. I didn't feel good about it before the game started, and then he gives up 4 home runs. And
well, with Gausman and Bundy, it's different. I think we judge them a little differently because we do see them as guys that are going to be in this rotation next year. No matter what, they're coming back. They're going to pitch. They're going to get the ball every 5th day next summer. And yet we're sitting here this summer, and at least with Gausman, and look, with Bundy, Bundy's been good. He's been fine. He's had the little dip in the middle and whatever, and we'll see how he finishes up and how many innings he actually ends with. I don't know that you're ever going to pencil him in for 230 innings, but, I think they are measured differently, and certainly given the draft status and given the lore and given if we're ever going to be good again, these guys have to be a part of that, because it's not going to be Jimenez or Alec Asher, I should say, or Mike Wright or Tyler Wilson that is going to be the next 20-game winner for this franchise. Yeah,
they're counting on them so much now and in the future, as you said. And Bundy, I think the big question will just be probably stamina. And, we'll see how he finishes up here over the final 5.5 weeks or so, and how they try to limit his innings, and then, just see how he performs. Gausman, the good news is he has pitched better, and but for him to be as poor as he was on Saturday, as much as I just spent time talking about Caleb Joseph, who is the better receiver, who probably should be playing more than Wellington Castillo at that point. When you look at the difference in staff ERA when he catches compared to Castillo, it's about a difference of 1.2 runs in terms of ERA. That's significant, and they've caught almost an even workload as the season has gone on. But that said, the guy can't give up 4 home runs in 4 innings of work. That's just completely unacceptable. So
even on a hot night.
So I can't put all of that on Castillo. And I want to make very clear, I'm not blaming Wellington Castillo for all of Kevin Gausman's struggles. My point was more, he'd gotten into such a groove with Joseph catching all but one of his starts since that disastrous Cubs start to begin the second half. I just didn't see why you mess with that.
Yeah, if you have a catcher that's calming to a pitcher in any way or their success, it stands to reason you should try to do that. Yeah. By the way, Joseph took that shot off the skull late in the game on Sunday. That didn't look good either.
Yeah. Good to see him stay in the game, and you hope he was fine there. Caleb Joseph is tough. Considering what happened to him last year with the injury to the area that any guy can just cringes thinking about. Remember, he stayed in that game. It was incredible to see. But like I said, even if it's not all about the pitch framing, even if it's not all about sequencing as far as calling pitches, even if it's a placebo effect where you just have more confidence and you just feel like you have a better mojo with him behind the plate. And the numbers certainly support that. Gausman's ERA with Castillo this year I think he has 14 starts with Castillo. He has 13 with Caleb Joseph. His ERA with Castillo is up over 7. With Joseph, it's in I think the low 3s off the top of my head. I mean, that's significant. So I know I'm beating up Castillo. It's not all about him by any stretch. Gausman's got to pitch better, and he had been pitching better, but he didn't on Saturday. And that was Saturday was such an opportunity for them to not just win another game and take the series, but to build some momentum to start this homestand. And at some point, you have to look at all these guys that are on this club have to be looking at this and saying, just can't get any traction. I mean, every time they win a game, they win the opener of a series, you're thinking, okay, this is going to be, series win. We get on a little bit of a roll, and they got on their mini roll a couple weeks ago, but winning 8 of 10, I mean, that's fine, but you need to have something a little more stretched out than that. How about playing really good baseball for 3 weeks? And then see where you are. So you just wonder, and I know Chris Davis spoke about it briefly after the game on Sunday, that he kind of said that this is kind of what we've been all year, unfortunately, where we have an opportunity and we don't get the big hit, or we don't protect the lead. He's just kind of speaking in universal terms that they haven't done enough things to be able to stack wins consistently since about the middle of May.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. The Oakland A's are in town the next couple of days. We'll be visiting with some folks who know a little bit about them. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills, who play some fake football here on Sunday night, and Luke and I are going to spend a large portion of this week trying to figure out the Ravens and the Purple Birds as the season is almost set to start. And I know we're all waiting for fake football to end, but at least we have some real baseball this week to keep us busy, and, of course, an Oriole trip to Fenway this weekend, too. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. You can find me out on the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning digitally. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, and still got a little bit of beach time there left before Labor Day, as well as into the fall. I'm working on my physique as well now that part of our summer strife is over around here. Last but never least, any breaking news. And sometimes it's bad news on the Ravens side. Sometimes it's just shuttling on the Orioles side, moving chairs on the Titanic, if it were. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford at Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. That's a Sunday Sports Voice. Now heard on Thursday from 3 until 5. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am, much like Mr. Angelos, a very available individual. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And don't forget, we're in London next month with a big party on the Saturday before the game. We're going to be doing a Purple Sky connection on the Emirates Air cable car over the Thames River on the way to the O2 Arena in East London, and we're going to have a few pints as well in my mom's honor. We'll still be honoring her. I think every time I put a beer up to my lips, I'll be honoring my mom here for the rest of the year, maybe the rest of my life. We hope to see you in London. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.